Hey, we're doing stand-up shows October 20th through the 23rd in Florida and Buffalo. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for tickets. Let's talk about Colin Powell, because Colin Powell has, well, here it is. Colin Powell has died of COVID-19. He's the first black Secretary of State. He helped shape foreign policy in several Republican administrations. So I guess COVID is trying to revamp its public image. I guess that's COVID. COVID doesn't want you to hit. Look, we took out a war criminal. I think that's what COVID is saying. We're not all bad. I think that's what they're saying. And where do you think Colin Powell? I like to hear that conversation he had right after he passed away. Him going, hey, I found weapons of mass destruction, and Satan's going, yeah, of course you did. Where did you think you were going? Okay. So, and by the way, stay away from social media today because the apologists are out in full force. And I'm going to do what I always do when a war criminal dies. I'm going to watch every tribute and take a shot every time somebody says the word patriot. So Colin Powell, he passed away this morning due to complications from COVID-19. He was fully vaccinated. So, but he had an underlying, he had that myeloma, I think that's how you say it. He had a cancer. He had beaten it. But they say that complicated. That's why the COVID got him, because he had this cancer thing. R.I.P. Colin Powell, a war criminal who lied us to the UN, to Congress about Saddam Hussein possessing weapons of mass destruction, a lie that cost the lives of over 1 million Iraqis. So, yeah. Colin Powell became the Bush White House's indispensable pitch man for the Iraq war. You know, only in the United States could somebody be unironically described as a pitchman for an illegal war and still be celebrated. Among alone among the president's war council, the four-star general was seen by Republicans, Democrats, the news media, and the public as a figure of unassailable credibility, which he didn't deserve, by the way. When Colin Powell spoke before the UN Security Council, it was that by then widely understood that Iraq had played no role in September 11th attacks, nor did it possess weapons of mass destruction. Although you're never going to hear that from the New York Times in real time. You'll hear that 20 years later, but you're not going to hear that in real time. In real time, they were amplifying what he was saying. Nearly all the intelligence Colin Powell presented to the world in his UN speech turned out to be false. Whoopsie, just a little gaffe. Everything I said as a pretext for a war was false. You want to hear some of it? Here's some of it.
Emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons.
Their thick intelligence file
is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents.
That thick intelligence file, by the way, is housed inside the imagination of Halliburton, just in case you were wondering where they keep it. The intelligence file was as fabricated as all the tributes to Colin Powell are going to be also. Okay, here we go. Now here's a bunch of scary-sounding stuff. None of it's going to be real, but trust me, we need to blow shit up. Watch this.
Take you inside that intelligence file and share with you what we know from eyewitness accounts. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. The trucks and train cars are easily moved and are designed to evade detection by inspectors. In a matter of months, they can produce a quantity of biological poison equal to the entire amount that Iraq claimed to have produced in the years prior to the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein's intentions have never changed. He is not developing the missiles for self-defense. These are missiles that Iraq wants in order to project power, to threaten, and to deliver chemical, biological, and, if we let him, nuclear warheads.
So he knew he was lying, just so you know. It's in case you didn't. And this should be his tombstone, by the way. Lie after lie, what Colin Powell knew about Iraq 15 years ago and what he told the UN. The evidence is irrefutable. Powell consciously deceived the world in his 2003 presentation, making the case for war with Saddam Hussein. But I knew this is his one. You know how this is what Colin Powell says about it. But I knew I didn't have any choice, he said. What choice did I have? He's the president. Well, I guess everything's forgiven then. I guess you didn't have Wow. Also, okay. Here's Code Pink's tribute. Colin Powell was a liar and a war criminal. There you go. Colin Powell was the first black Secretary of State. He is a war criminal responsible for the death of millions. Eric Holder was the first black Attorney General who sided with Wall Street, gave them immunity after rampant white-collar crime, which crashed our economy. What does this tell you? That's from Nick is a Fred Hampton leftist. That's friend of the show, Nick. It tells me a lot. The idea that enabling the Iraq War was the one blemish, because that's what he would say. That was his pockmark on my... He would say that. That was a blemish on my record. A blemish. It's a dangerous fantasy. Easily disproven by hundreds of thousands of women, children, elderly nuns, priests, and other Central American innocents slaughtered with Powell's help. People forget about the stuff he did in Central America. Well, since he's trending, important to remember that Colin Powell was one of the leading generals arming, training, and protecting the Salvadorian military and death squads responsible for slaughtering 75 to 80,000 people. He did so throughout the war. Duarte was the bloodiest of the Salvadorian presidents. Good for you, Colin. When the offense of 1989 made clear that the offensive of 1989 made clear that the Salvadorian military could not defeat the FMLN guerrillas, then Chairman of George Herbert Walker Bush's Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, threatened U.S. military intervention. Powell also led the invasion of Panama, which left countless, mostly poor and black Panamanians dead. All this and more before he became the George W. Bush U.S. Secretary of State, who lied to the world about Iran's Iraqi nuclear capabilities in order to start the war that left over 1 million dead in its wake. Not someone to celebrate our name or name schools after. Colin Powell's shameful role in the U.S. propaganda campaign to justify its invasion of Iraq is well known. But what's less spoken about is that he facilitated, covered up, and justified U.S. war crimes in Vietnam, including the notorious My Lai massacre. Did you know that? That's your buddy. That's our buddy. That's the buddy. Colin Powell was assigned to investigate reinforced allegations of a massacre at My Lai in March of 1968, in which U.S. soldiers killed hundreds of civilians, including children. So, sanitizing war crimes, that's what he was doing. That's what makes you electable. Powell's conclusion that in direct refutation of this portrayal, relations between American soldiers and the Vietnamese people are excellent, flew in the face of growing evidence of brutal treatment of civilians by U.S. forces. So he was completely giving you a 100% whitewashed version of what was going on that was untethered to reality. He was later accused of whitewashing the news of the massacre, details of which became fully public in 1970. If elected, progressives who said nothing when Mike Gravel died give condolences to Colin Powell, the war criminal. I'm going to turn into the Joker. Well, get ready. If you're going to... So they are. So here's Jamal Bowman, recently elected Justice Democrat, part of the squad. He says, as a black man just trying to figure out the world, Colin Powell was an inspiration. He's inspired by war criminals. He was from New York City, went to City College, rose to the highest ranks of our nation, slaughtering, murdering people, and covering up war crimes, sending love, strength, and prayer to the family and friends of Secretary Powell. Rest in power. The power to annihilate black and brown people who can't fight back. That's the kind of power he's going to rest in. God damn, I hate these people. Jamal, who are you? Really? Inspiration? A war criminal inspired you? That's from Jay Buffon. Professor Zenkis says he's in the club now. These are the things they say. That is the things he says. That's exactly right. Fighting the status quo and bombs by praising war criminals, because that's what his Twitter bio says, causing problems for the status quo, not bombs and incarceration. But what did he just do? He didn't cause any problems to the status quo, and he just embraced bombs. General Colin Powell's death is so shocking and heartbreaking. He had some, this is from Joyanne Reed from MSNBC. He had some tough moments around our wars, but was a fundamentally good and decent man. He had some tough moments.
He's decent.
You know who else had some tough moments? All the people in Iraq, Panama, El Salvador. All the innocent casualties around the world. All of the soldiers who were either killed or their lives were ruined. They've had some tough moments around the wars, too. Wow. He had some tough moments. Wow. I mean, just in case you forgot, Powell also knew about the Iraq torture programs and went along with them. If you think that was a tough moment for him, it was definitely tough for the people the U.S. were torturing. He helped cover up war crimes, helped perpetrate the highway of death war crimes, and lied us into a war that killed over 1 million people and displaced tens of millions more. If there were any justice in America, he would have been convicted of war crimes at The Hague. Yeah, but his friends running military contracting companies made a lot of money, so you have to look at it from both sides. So let's bring in Max Blumenthal. We've done enough here. Max Blumenthal, what do you have to say about the passing of Colin Powell and how he's being lauded today by progressives?
I saw someone, I tweeted about him. He's like a Defense One reporter, blamed the unvaccinated for killing Colin Powell. And I was just like wondering where they were when like Dick Cheney was still. I mean, Dick Cheney's still around, so like, where are they for him? I mean, Colin Powell really wasn't necessarily the most diabolical figure out of the Bush administration, one or two, which is sort of why he has managed to maintain so much prestige and rise through the ranks throughout his career, because he commands a level of credibility that he doesn't deserve, because he follows orders so willingly, and he follows the orders of people like Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, in his role presiding over the dirty war in Central America and El Salvador, as well as, I mean, he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff back then, as well as the completely phony criminal war on Panama, which we can get into. So Colin Powell has been there throughout so many of the heinous deceptions and attacks. He also justified the Clinton administration's bombing of the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical plant in Sudan, which was supposed to be a retaliation for Al-Qaeda attack presided over by bin Laden. And what they did was they blew up the facility that produced 50% of the pharmaceutical drugs in Sudan, including drugs that were kind of like horse dewormers. We hear that a lot, but that actually prevented parasites in rural livestock, and it caused a massive parasite infestation in the rural populations of Sudan that led to the deaths of thousands of children and vulnerable people. And Colin Powell said that they absolutely needed to do it. The plant was owned by bin Laden. So it's not just him holding the vial, reading the script, reciting the allegations of a phony defector named Curveball who was cultivated by the CIA and lying the U.S. into war. It was all throughout his career. Colin Powell has been at the heart of so many regime change and criminal deceptions. And why do they love him now? Why do all these sort of liberal celebrities love him? It's because he supported Barack Obama. That's the only reason. And he helped bring another war criminal who had more credibility than he deserved, who comes from a very similar background and follows a very similar set of establishment orders into office so that the crimes could continue. Remember, Colin Powell was in the military when the Reagan administration first attacked Libya, first attempted to assassinate Gaddafi, and then Colin Powell helped bring in Barack Obama, who finished the job, turning Libya into a failed state, destabilizing that entire area of North Africa, destabilizing parts of Europe, you could even argue, by the refugee crisis they caused. And it was all Colin Powell who helped bestow credibility and military support for Obama. And Barack Obama has thanked him today. Well, Barack Obama's message was weird. I mean, you should read that off. He basically thanked Colin Powell for telling America that he was not a Muslim. He said, at a time of dangerous, I can do my own, at a time of dangerous conspiracy theories, Colin Powell was there to say that I was not a Muslim. because being a Muslim would be absolutely terrible. And that's what he thanked him for. So Colin Powell's been instrumental. He also is instrumental, Jimmy, in a sort of indirect way in the destruction of American media, which began obviously under the Reagan administration when they got rid of the Fairness Doctrine. Then the Clinton administration worked to privatize media further, relaxing regulations. And Colin Powell, after he left the Bush administration, stuck his son in as the chairman of the FCC. And he enacted some of the most extreme privatization measures in media, basically handing the media over to corporate behemoths like Sinclair and Clear Channel. His son was Michael Powell. That's another chapter that I think is forgotten here.
Yes.
So we have to look at the little details, the footnotes of Colin Powell to understand how insidious he was.
And he was allowed to, he was embraced by the shit libs, as I like to call them, the people who vote blue no matter who, the Blue Anon cult, the religion that is called the Democratic Party. He was embraced by them because, he did back. So he was very much like Barack Obama. He presented well, right? You would never think he's a war criminal. You would never think that Barack Obama is going to drone bomb children in weddings and put kids in cages who come here. You would never think he would do that. He did those stuff. Same thing with Colin Powell, because they're always so soft-spoken. They're always, again, they're just well-mannered. And so I guess that's the biggest sin that you can commit, is having bad manners and being impolite, which is why Trump was such a bad face of the empire. Because, he had all these warts that he regularly showed. He let you know he was a crazy maniac, whereas those people are able to hide it behind some kind of respectability that's fake. And and then Colin Powell went on to not like Trump. So he was crazed that he's perfect for the Democratic Party of today. He supports all the stuff Republicans do, which is what Barack Obama supported too. And then he also hates Donald Trump. So that's why he's so loved. And he's a horrible, atrocious human being, Colin Powell. And he wasn't the worst of them. That's what's kind of funny. He was one of the good ones. And
yeah. I mean, everyone gets forgiven in today's Democratic Party if they take on Trump or Trumpism. I mean, it's not just Colin Powell, it's William Kristol. There was even a moment when I think Dick Cheney did a little PSA for mask wearing, and I saw some Twitter liberal influencers sharing it. His daughter has been welcomed and, partnered with Representative Scott Crow, I think, to introduce a bill to try to stifle the withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Cheney name is sort of, it's not poisonous anymore. George W. Bush, I mean, he's on a speaking tour right now. He's raking in huge lecture fees. Maybe, two guys, Mike Preisner and Jeb Sprague, heckled him, but everyone else is paying for some reason to go to these talks. These people should be in Iraqi prisons, and they walk free among us. And, Bill Kristol's hanging out with Ari Melber, and they're doing woke Bill Kristol segments. I mean, this is someone who kind of made the intellectual case for the war in Iraq, the war in Syria, a war on Iran. All of these people are the most, I mean, we agree, they're the most heinous figures, but there's almost there's this clear cultural shift from the second Bush term. And I really blame Obama for it. It was Obama who decided not to prosecute Bush.
That's right.
It was Obama who decided, along with his wife, to befriend the Bush family. It was Obama who decided not to prosecute the banksters who destroyed the economy and caused a foreclosure crisis. And it was Obama who continued the legacy or the path that was charted out by Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan, who wound up advising Hillary Clinton's campaign in their call for a new American century or a benevolent American hegemony, American control over the entire world, where they would topple 7 nations in 5 years. And you look at those 7 nations, well, it took longer than 5 years, but Barack Obama bumped off one of them and nearly destroyed another, Syria. So it was really Obama's fault for all of this. And you look at the background that Obama and Colin Powell come from, and the kind of messages you see from influential Black progressives today. I was listening to Gerald Horne today, the Black American Marxist historian, talking about Colin Powell's background, and he made a really good point, which is that Powell and Obama, they come from immigrant backgrounds. Their experience is different than a lot of Black Americans, and they were welcomed into the white establishment, which they catered to, and Obama particularly spent a large amount of his presidency talking down to Black Americans who had a very different experience than him. Yeah. Telling them to pull up their pants and stop watching SportsCenter. Just at the Morehouse graduation ceremony, pointing his finger at them. I mean, these are people who've worked through so much, who many of them, have overcome so many structural obstacles. And Obama just sat there and lectured them as if they'd done something wrong when they had graduated from one of the best colleges in the country. And that's the mentality that's really celebrated. It's also the Bill Cosby mentality, where Cosby went on his speaking tour, denouncing Black Americans as criminals and telling them it's all their fault. And Powell, well, did he stand up against the first Bush administration during the LA riots? No. Did he say anything about Rodney King? No. He always kept his head down, and he always followed orders. And it's really disgusting to see people celebrate that quality of him when we should be celebrating disobedience. I mean, we should be celebrating the disobedience of the whistleblowers at the My Lai massacre, who disobeyed their superiors to stop the massacre that Colin Powell covered up.
That's right.
But that's not the kind of culture that elite, those who are determining the path of the Democratic Party and liberal culture in this country are cultivating. They want you to obey every single mandate. And so Colin Powell, in that sense, is a perfect icon for them.
Well, let's just remember that Colin Powell endorsed Joe Biden for president in 2020 at the Democratic National Convention. So this guy, one of the guys who got us into the Iraq War, lied about it, covered up the My Lai massacre in both Bush administrations. He was welcomed at the 2020 Democratic Convention.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Powell in the 90s was actually being spoken about as a potential Republican nominee for the presidency. That's right. And what happened was Pat Buchanan came along and forced the Republican Party to deal with what is now the Trumpist faction, starting with his culture war speech at the 92 convention, which kind of ruined it for George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush wanted to win over the suburban moms. That's what Clinton and him were fighting for. They were fighting for the suburban swing voters. And George H.W. Bush wanted to hide behind Colin Powell and set the stage for him to take over the party in 96. And Pat Buchanan comes along and does his culture war speech. And George H.W. Bush realizes he can't pivot to the center. So Colin Powell was always a moderate Republican who had this fantasy of being the first Barack Obama before there was an Obama. And he wound up just kind of paving the path for Obama, who was himself a moderate Republican, just from a purely ideological standpoint.
Yes. And from the way he governed. He was. He even said it in his own words. If it was in the 80s, he would be considered a moderate Republican. He said it. That's out of Barack Obama's own mouth when he was on Venezuelan television. So, and here's what Joe Biden had to say about
the idea that I took the word of a president saying that he wasn't going to go to war, and this was the way to avoid going to war.
The only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert, taking taking Saddam down.
So that's Joe Biden today says that he got duped. He voted for it because he thought George Bush would only use the threat of war. He wouldn't actually go to war. George Bush promised him he wouldn't go to war. Well, do you see how Joe Biden's a pathological liar and a warmongering maniac? Do you see how he's lying? Do you see how he's...
Well, that was Joe Biden when he was still alive.
Yeah. So let me show it to you again. Here we go.
The idea that I took the word of a president saying that he wasn't going to go to war, and this was the way to avoid going to war.
The only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert, taking taking Saddam down.
Because I didn't believe he had those nuclear weapons. I didn't believe he had those weapons of mass destruction.
Other countries have or seek weapons of mass destruction. Saddam has actually used them. Is that he possesses chemical and biological weapons and is seeking nuclear weapons.
It was a mistake to trust that they weren't going to go to war. They said they were not going to go to war.
For me, the issue is never whether we had to deal with Saddam, but when and how. That is that the threat need not be imminent for us to take action.
From the moment shock and awe started, from that moment, I was opposed to the effort and I was outspoken.
Some of my own party have said that it was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place. 9 months ago, I voted with my colleagues to give the President of the United States of America the authority to use force. And I would vote that way again today. It was a right vote then, and to be a correct vote today.
I trusted George Bush to keep his word. He said he was not going to go into Iraq.
That a free and democratic Iraq, if it could be accomplished, could have a cleansing impact on that part of the world and make our life easier.
So there's Joe Biden being a pathological liar. And of course, they're lies of consequence. They're not stupid lies about how big his building is or anything like Donald Trump lied about. So I'm not that Donald Trump didn't also lie about consequential things, but the things they get mad about Donald Trump are not the consequential things. They get mad about him over the little things. And of course, because nobody gets mad when you lie about a war. Why? Because the military-industrial complex has a stranglehold on our media. So no one cares that, and that's what shapes the culture. Our culture is shaped by a handful of billionaires who own the media and have willing lapdogs like Rachel Maddow, Joyanne Reid, Anderson Cooper, Sanjay Gupta, Don Lemon, these kind of tools that do their bidding. And that's why we live in the culture we live in. And that's why this guy, instead of being in a prison, is the head of the country and everyone thinks he's respectable. Instead of what he is, a bloodthirsty maniac who's also a war criminal and a pathological liar. And that's why you know why him and Colin Powell got along. Okay. We're doing stand-up comedy in Florida, in West Palm Beach and Dania, and then we're going to Buffalo, Baltimore, Tempe, and Portland. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.